Hi, I'm Ashlie Smith, and welcome to this episode of Nature in the Hills. Today we have special guest Genot Picor with us. Welcome to the show, Genot.
Thank you.
So you have a really amazing background in all different types of things, from writing to being a retired school teacher to storytelling. So can you give us a little bit more information about your personal and your professional background?
Sure. I'm also a psychologist.
Okay, so we added something. Good.
I was working at Northville Regional as a psychologist, and when the government funding changed, I went back to school teaching, and I was working actually 3 jobs, one as a school teacher and then 2 in a private clinic. And I had some I call them personal tragedies in my life. And afterwards, I thought, is this what I want to do for the rest of my time? Being in a car and moving from place to place. So I decided that I was going to audition for a musical dance theater, local dance theater.
Wow.
And I have a background in theater. I did that. I closed up my, my private work in the psychological clinics, and I was with that musical dance theater for 3 years, and then decided to go out on my own.
Okay, that's really cool. So can you tell us a little bit more about now what your future career goals are? Where do you see yourself in the future, or one of the things that you're doing now?
Well, I had retired from public school teaching after 30 years. I retired as a teacher consultant with middle school children. And I had been practicing storytelling on my own for 13 years. And when I was ready for retirement, I decided to go back to school. So I'm currently a master's candidate in interpretive performance studies at Eastern Michigan University. Thank you. And the previous degrees that I'd earned were for advancement in my field, but this one is for my culture. This one is for me. This for the folklore, the Native American resistance rhetoric, the rich history of Native American culture. Will be my scholarly contribution to my culture.
Wow, that's great. So you mentioned Native American storytelling, and that's one of the ways that we met from some of the programs that we've done in the past. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in storytelling and Voyager programs through the schools and through different places?
In 1999, I started to become involved in genealogy, which can be a time-consuming undertaking. And so many people over the years had asked if we had relatives in Quebec. Well, surprisingly, when I was 14, my father came home from work and just said, "We're going to Quebec." I said, "Really?"
Wow, that's a fun trip.
I mean, by age 14, I'd already crossed the U.S. 3 times.
Wow, that's awesome.
So we made vacation plans, and off we went, and we ended up in a place called Lorette. And I had never heard of Lorette, and my father asked me to stay in the car. My brother was car sick, so he wasn't going anywhere, so my mother stayed with him. And he went out to talk to people, and curiosity just got the best of me. And as I'm walking around, I'm looking at the tombstones, and a lot of them have our last name on them. So I asked my father about that. I said, why are there so many tombstones with our last name? Because our last name had been changed. And my father didn't want to talk about that. So fast forward a few years, and I'm relaying the story to some Native American elders about our connection to Lorette, and turns out that although I can't prove or disprove it, chances are there's a strong likelihood of my Huron or Wendat on our language, our connection to that land. And to that part of the country. Wendat, when English-speaking people hear that, they say Wyandot.
Oh, right.
So Wyandot and Huron are basically the same people.
That's interesting. Okay, so then you started to find out more about your roots, and then is that one of the ways you got involved in storytelling then, is kind of telling your people's culture then?
Absolument.
Oh, great.
And I say the French word for that because so many Huron people had intermarried with the French. So the two are almost indistinguishable. especially from a cultural point of view, so much of one another's culture now is intertwined
Right.
among the mixed blood people.
Right. Right, and I think it's something really interesting to get the mix of both cultures, because you do voyageur programs, and that's what a lot of the kids, the school-age kids, learn about the fur traders coming through Michigan and the journey that they had and the relationships that they had with the Native Americans. So I think it's great that you're able to tell kind of both stories and share that with people of all ages, which is really great.
The mixed blood culture is called the Métis or
Oh,
Métis
right.
culture, and the Métis actually have their own form of storytelling, their own style, which combines French animation and embellishment with Native American reverence for the earth.
Okay, that's interesting. So going along with that then, learning more about your roots, you have the Native American name Winter Elk. Can you tell us the story behind that?
When I started to undergo my genealogy and found the strong connection to my native roots, I started to become associated with different Native American centers here in southeast Michigan. Not so much to, I never wanted a tribal card or a Métis card. In Canada, the Métis have their own indigenous status. I just wanted to find out more about the culture of what had been hidden for so long.
Right.
So it was interactions with the elders in the community that for whatever reason, led me to a dream where I was walking among the elk. In my culture, elk is the animal spirit of the month in which I was born, December, the month of the long snows moon. And so I had this dream I was walking among the elk. So I went up to Gaylord to look for elk, and I strapped on my snowshoes and went trekking through the forest, and I could see the elk tracks.
Yeah.
But elk are wary creatures, and they were far in the distance.
Right.
But up above me was Wingeezy the eagle. And I had wondered, if I had eagle's point of view, I could see where those. I could see them. I would know where they're at. But it was getting close. It was getting late in the evening, and I decided to go back into town, and in some ways it was cheating, because in Gaylord there's an elk compound. So I asked one of the fellows there if I could walk into the herd, and he said, "Well, be careful, they're in rut, and they can be very protective of their territory." So I took my cameras, and in I went and walked among the herd, and unmolested, and I got some close-ups of the elk. And it was, at that time, a doe, not an elk, but a doe, came out of the backwoods and started following me around. And I have a picture of the close-up of her face. She got up on her hind legs and put her front legs on my, and was licking my face. I had to call my daughter. I pulled out my cell phone. I said, "Hannah, you wouldn't believe what's happening to me right now." So I came back and I shared that experience with the elder, and I asked him if the Creator wishes me to have a name, can that name be Winter Elk? And our elder prayed about it and said that he would indeed grant me that name. So that was given to me in a ceremony, September 28th.
Wow, that's a very cool story.
Yeah.
So they have a whole ceremony then when you are given your native name.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And we invite friends and relatives.
Okay.
And we have a circle, and there's one person in each corner of the circle. So we have somebody at the eastern, southern, western, and northern gate. And I'm responsible to these men for the rest of my life.
Okay.
And also for the man, the elder, the holy man who presided over the ceremony. And if I bring disgrace to my culture or my community, I can have that name taken away from me.
So it's definitely very life-changing.
Oh, absolutely.
But it sounds like you had a really great story about connecting with nature, and I just think that's a wonderful story to be able to share with people. And so going with that too, why do you think it's important for kids and adults of all ages for them to know about Native culture and our history?
Well, I don't like to sugarcoat history.
Right.
we were here for, we meaning the native peoples, were here for so long, long before the Europeans arrived. And we wanted to share what we knew about survival in this hostile environment. And like waves on the shore, they just kept coming and coming. And
Right.
our cultures were such that we didn't write anything down. I mean, we were an oral culture. We took people at their word. And unfortunately, we were pushed farther and farther away, away from our homelands, on marches that caused great hardship
Right.
to our people. And this country should remember that. We also, we were the first culture to inhabit, or cultures, plural, because there are differences among native cultures, to inhabit this continent. And that history is important.
Right. I think it's important to hear different perspectives on the history, too, of our country and making sure that they get the full story.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yes.
right. So in your messages that you give with your storytelling, you're often giving life lessons or connectedness. So how do you connect kids with nature with your storytelling and your music and the games that you play with them?
Well, the last time I was here, we were telling stories out by the campfire, and a heron flew over. Now, in my culture, that's a message that heron gives, because you don't really see a heron every day, unless you're out here. It was heron's way of saying, tell my story.
Yeah.
And one of the stories about heron is the creator made him the way he looks so that the fish could see him coming from a distance because he has a voracious appetite.
Right.
Well, what's the message? The message is that we need to conserve our environment, treat it with respect, make sure that there's enough
Right.
to pass around so everyone gets a chance to eat.
Right. I think it's important for just the message that you give of relating, our needs and our wants to what the animals and the plants all around us, that we share those same things and that we need to share our stay here on the earth. I think that's a nice message that you share with the kids, and then make sure they respect all things in nature. That's one of the messages that we like to get out in our Thanksgiving for Nature program, is giving thanks for all the things that you can find outdoors, whether it's plants or animals, to the smallest little insect to a great blue heron, which is a really special bird that you're right, you don't get to see it very often.
Native people, we give thanks for the earth every day.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of our Thanksgiving for Nature program, you've helped out with that a few years now. We usually host it the Saturday before Thanksgiving for families and kids of all ages. So can you tell us a little bit about what you've done with that program in the past, some of the activities you've done with us?
Sure. Some of the stories, I don't know if I'll be telling this one, but it's how Bumblebee saved the pond. When it's nice to tell that story in the presence of a body of water. The message there is you don't have to be the biggest to do something big. The activities, though, are focused on survival. So, for example, if we're playing Keeper of the Fire, we have two people, they're competitors, one who watches over 3 sticks and another who's blindfolded. Oh, let me back that up. The person who's watching over the 3 sticks is blindfolded.
Right. So they're using
their
hearing, sense of hearing.
Right. And the person who is trying to gently take away the sticks is trying to use stealth and body control. Another game that we play is memorizing orders or positions of stones, because it was important to memorize the environment if you were going to find your way back home.
And I think that that's a good thing too that we do with a lot of our programs, is using nature to navigate through, being observant, looking at the things around you, rocks, trees, any type of landmark that you can find in the natural world to find your way. So I think that's a really great skill to have. And just watching them too during the Thanksgiving for Nature program play the different games, like the Keeper of the Fire, them using their problem-solving skills to get even better at it the more times they play. So even in that short time that they're here for the program, they're learning those new skills.
Right.
And I think it's also great to watch when you do the storytelling with them, how you really get the kids involved in the story. So not only are you very animated and getting them excited, but you also are really great at bringing them out and getting them being part of the story. So can you talk a little bit about how you bring the kids in and how you get them to become part of the story that you're telling?
In one of the classes that I've taken at EMU, which was improvisation, one of the first things we learned is that our ability to use our imagination has been trained or schooled out of us. And I don't mean that from a public school point of view. It's over the years, we have to problem solve quickly. And we're taught that A leads to B and B leads to C. The imagination of children is so fertile that they immediately connect with the animal that they're portraying.
Right.
That part of them hasn't been drummed out of them yet. So they immediately identify with the animal, taking on the animal's characteristics, even some of the vocalizations of that animal. So in that respect, it's easy.
Right.
Children are ready partners.
Right, and it makes this, I think it gives the story more special meaning for them too, when they're able to think back at that memory and have that tangible experience where they got to get up, make the animal sound, move around, and learn the story of their animal too. So I think it really sticks with them a lot when they get to experience that. And I think also with Thanksgiving for Nature, it's a really great atmosphere. You know, folks are arriving, they're going on the scavenger hunt through the trails, getting to find out how we can be thankful for all of nature's gifts, how we use an oak tree or why a possum is important. And then getting to come back and by the warm fire and listen to some music and some storytelling and get involved in some games and some crafts. So I think it's a really wonderful atmosphere and experience for the whole day. And it's a different way to celebrate Thanksgiving than what we traditionally think about.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It makes, or I shouldn't say makes, it encourages people to become closer with our first mother, which is the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look forward to having you again this year, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, so folks can look forward to that. But where can folks get a little bit more information about the things that you do?
Well, I have a website,
Okay.
genotpicor.com. Genot is not a name that you hear every day. It's the French equivalent of Gino. So
Right?
it's Genot.
Okay.
Picor.com, all one word.
Okay, and I know that you have some great videos on there and some great pictures of things that you've done in the past, so I think it's a great website for folks to check out to learn a bit more about what you do and a little bit more about you too. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Some of the pictures that they'll see are some of my own nature photography.
Oh, great.
And I've had some close calls over the years with animals, but I've also had some great gifts.
Right. Yeah, you never know what to expect when
That's
you're
true
out
with
there.
nature photography, that's right.
Right. So before you leave today, would you be kind enough to share one of your special stories or some music with us?
I'd be honored.
That would be great, thanks.
Many years ago, in the land that they call the Michigami, there was a creature named Sugami. Sugami was as big as a person, had wings and a spear on the top of its forehead from which it took the blood of all living creatures. And so the living creatures got together and they said to the Great Spirit, "Oh, Great Spirit, send us someone to save us from Sugami. If Sugami is allowed to live, there'll be no life left." And so the Great Spirit sent Keeper of the Heavens at first to reason and counsel with Sugami. And if that failed, well, then to fight as enemies. Well, Keeper of the Heavens asked Sugami, "Sugami, do you think you can learn to live in peace with everyone?" Sugami just said, "Bzzz." And that's all Sugami ever said. Well, this council went on for many days, and Sugami would not give in. And so a great battle ensued. And finally, Keeper of the Heavens picked up Sugami, lifted him above his head, and threw his body on a rock. And his body exploded into millions of droplets of blood. And from those droplets of blood came tiny Sugami. And they buzzed all around the head of Keeper of the Heavens, and he couldn't fight them all. And Keeper of the Heavens ran back to the Great Spirit and said, there's nothing that we can do. Sugami will forever be with the people and creatures of Michigan. And so the Great Spirit said to Sugami, Sugami, if I let you live in the Michigami year-round, there will be no life left. When Keewaydin lets loose his icy breath, you will go far to the south, and you'll stay there for 6 moons. And only when the weather returns and when it's warm and wet will you come back to the place that they call Michigami. And so that's why it is in the middle of July and August, sometimes we hear Sugami singing in our ear. And that's the legend of how mosquito came to be. And that's why you never see a mosquito in Michigan in November.
Very good, right?
That's
We're
something
very
to be
lucky.
thankful for, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're
and thank you
welcome.
so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for watching this episode of Nature in the Hills.